Hello YouTube, this is Froogle, and here we are back in Innsbruck. Now before you groan, I know I did Innsbruck last week. I did actually say in that video, by the way, for those who didn't see the video last week, I actually revisited an approach that I did when I actually started the channel, which was landing the PMDG 737 NGX here in Innsbruck. And I did it originally in FSX, of course, and I did it last week in prepared version 3 because with the improvements to the scenery, the environmental effects, the flight model, the improvements to everything pretty much, I thought it would be a great experience to try and do this complex approach in a brand new sim. Anyway, when I did that video, I actually said, as I was recording it, I would love to do it again, but in X-Plane. I've never done the Innsbruck approach in X-Plane. Well, that's not true. Now I have. Now I've done it about 50 times. But prior to last week's video, I'd never done the Innsbruck approach in X-Plane. So here we are with the FlyJSim 727. I know you can't hear any sim sound right now. I've got it paused. The reason why is that Jack Sketchers over at FlyJSim did an amazing job with the sound on this aircraft. It's very hard to talk over the sound of a 727. That's why it's paused. Anyway, so we're going to do things a little bit old school. Because it's an old 727, it doesn't have all the automated, computerized goodness of an NGX. It is a little bit manual. It is a little bit hands-on. It's actually quite good fun. Now, another thing I want to address before we dive in here, because it's going to come up, it always comes up in the comments, even when I do a video on one particular sim, I'll get a bunch of comments going, Sim X is better than Sim Y. That's not what this is about. Long-time viewers of FroogleSim know I am all about sims and simulation. I really don't care if you fly in X-Plane or if you fly in FS9 or FSX or prepared. I really don't care. As long as you're simming, that's good by me. X-Plane, I do not also believe that you can compare X-Plane to Prepared or FSX. They are completely different simulators with completely different focuses. I prefer, personally, the flight dynamics of X-Plane. Many people don't. They find them twitchy. They find them, as a result of the twitchiness, somewhat unrealistic. That's each to their own. Similarly, I actually prefer the graphics in X-Plane. Many people don't. They prefer the graphics in FSX. Many other people prefer the graphics in Prepared, and at least one person who commented on my video last week prefers the graphics of FS9. Each to their own. You like Monet, I like Picasso. Beauty is in the eye of the beholder. So let's just get all that out of the way. The flight modeling in X-Plane, though, is very different to anything you have used before outside of DCS because it uses blade element theory, which simulates how a surface, an individual surface, responds to moving air around it based on environmental conditions. Now, an aircraft like this obviously is made up of a number of different surfaces, such as the wing itself, the shape of that leading edge, the shape of that trailing edge, the shape of the body, the shape of the engines, the fact that it has an elevated full motion, I don't know, that's got a special name, hasn't it? That elevated tail on 727 or an MD-80 has a special name, I can't remember what it is. Aileron? I don't know. Elevatoron. It's got a weird name, but the whole surface moves. The whole thing rotates. But anyway, that plays into the blade element theory and how the aircraft handles. It's a bit of a handhold, it's a bit of a challenge. Just to make things even harder on myself, because I haven't flown with it for a while, I'm actually using the X55 today, so no yoke. So that was a bit of a learning curve for me, and appreciate what a lot of you go through trying to fly these complex airliners in these complex sims using nothing more than a joystick as opposed to a very expensive Yoko the Yoke or GoFlight GoPro, GoFlight GoPro, GoFly Yoke or whatever else. Too many brand names. Anyway, let me show you how to set this up. I have a situation saved. Now, situations are, you can put the aircraft in a certain state, configure all its radios and its systems exactly how you want, then you go up to the file menu and click Save Situation and just reload it over and over and over, a bit like loading a saved flight in FSX or Prepared. You don't have this situation saved, but what you can do is you can go to Location and go to Local Map. That will show you a picture of the local map. You see, I just flew this route actually just now. Look at that. That is a thing of beauty. Oh my god, I wish I was doing this almost fully loaded and I could show you the chart for the LOC DME 08 approach. It looks absolutely identical to that line. I am so pleased with myself. That's beautiful. That's a thing of immense beauty. Anyway, so what you need to do, you need to position your aircraft at wherever you want for this approach. Now, you will remember from the last video that the LOC DME 08 approach, this one right here, puts you initially at Rattenberg or RTT NDB at 9,500 feet. You then fly a heading of 230 until you intercept the 255 radial from OEV, which is Innsbruck. Once you fly down there, eventually you will pass over Absam at 6.3 miles away from Innsbruck. It's locked DME. There's the DME part, distance measuring equipment. At 6.3 miles away from Innsbruck, you will turn to a heading of 230. Then, as you approach Innsbruck NDB, you will turn right to a heading of 264. You can't miss it. If you wait too late, you'll collide with the side of a mountain. So you don't collide with the mountain onto a heading of 264 until you are about to collide with the mountain again, and then turn all the way around and land on runway 08. At this point, we should be at 3,700 feet. At this point, no lower than 5,000 feet. So 9,500 down to 5,000, down to 3,700. Now, as before on this flight, it's very similar to how you do it in the NGX. I'm actually doing things a little bit later in this because it's less automated, so it's more hands-on, so I want to give myself more wiggle room. So what I tend to do is I'm flaps 5, 180 knots all the way here until I get to about here. Then I'm 160 knots, flaps 15, gear down. We're going to go all the way around here. We will turn. When we come out of this turn and we're lining up on the runway, flaps 30, clear to land, away we go. Okay? So, to set yourself up in X-Plane to do this approach, simply click and drag on the flashing airplane symbol and put it at Rattenberg. It is as easy as that. Then all you need to do is change the heading that you're flying to, in this case, 210. It was 210, not 230. My apologies. Let me look at my chart here. Yeah, it's 210. 210 initially, and then 230 after that. So 210 degrees, like so. Set the altitude. We want to be at 9,500 feet. Now, when you do this, as soon as you get in the aircraft and unpause the sim, it will drop like a rock because it has to synchronize what you've got in your controls with the aircraft. The aircraft will plummet to groundwards. It's pretty bad. It takes a little while. That's another reason to set up a safe situation. So what I typically do is I put myself up here at about 11,000 feet, and then by the time we're hitting about 10,000, 9,500 feet, we are pretty much stabilized and good to go. Anyway, speed going to be 200 initially. No climb angle, no carrier heading, no frigate heading, and I would typically at this point say pause. You can see that's already set on pause, and then all you need to do is close this down, like so. That will cause the sim to reload, and it will load in all the scenery and everything else and put you at the RTT NDB ready to go but paused. Now, I'm going to load my situation as soon as this has demonstrated that it does what I say it does, because my situation has some additional stuff built in. That additional stuff is, of course, the radios. I'm actually dialed in the OEV VOR, which is 111.1. That is already dialed in. I've already set the radial we want to intercept at 255. I've done a bunch of stuff like that. You do all that stuff on the ground. So where I was when I started this video, that's typically where you'd set all the radios up, set everything good to go. I've also in my save situation rectified that. Hang on. That, the fact that we are geared down at 9,500 feet, which is not good, so I've rectified all of that. So that's why I'm going to load my situation right now. I will see you as soon as it is ready to go. Okay, welcome back. So I've loaded my situation, but even with my situation, the aircraft's still a little bit out of sorts. You can see we're descending at 2,000 feet per minute. That's going to increase. We were at 9,500, but it's going to drop. So the way I deal with this, unfortunately, this is just the nature of how things are with X-Plane setting up a flight like this. Until somebody like JP comes up with FSI panel for X-Plane, please do that, JP. We're stuck with this. So I have my throttles at the moment firewalled just to let the aircraft kind of get back to where we want it to be. And what I'm going to use is the autopilot vertical speed hold, which is down here. And we're going to use that just to climb back up to 9,500. Other than that, the other instruments are all set. So 111.1, that would be the Innsbruck VOR, is all dialed in. And we should be heading, we're not, we're going to change that. We should be heading at 210 degrees until we intercept that 255 radial. The other thing I'm going to do is change the speed hold, you'll see why later, down to 200. So with all that done, all we are interested in right now, we'll look out the window in a second. In fact, yeah, there's not much to see right now. By the way, these clouds, this is from the just released and phenomenal SkyMax 3 that was released last week. I actually covered it in last week's news show. And the weather is being generated by FSGRW, or FS Global Real Weather, which also was covered in the news show and just recently got an update to support X-Plane. So that's pretty cool. Almost fully loaded in terms of the add-ons that I'm using. The scenery that you're going to see, by the way, is all free. These are scenery tiles. I think they're called Z tiles or Z tiles from Sim Heaven, also combined with the AL Pilot meshes. Both of those are free. Go to simheaven.com and alpilotx.net, I think it is, to download the meshes and the textures and everything else. It's gigabytes upon gigabytes upon gigabytes of data, but all free, and it really does make X-Plane look absolutely spectacular. So with all that said, I'm going to unpause this and I'm going to change my view before I do that. And what I'm doing here is just changing my view so I can see the autopilot panel down here. I can see my vertical speed and my altitude. That's all I care about. In a minute or two, we'll be looking for this needle to start moving, and then we'll engage localizer hold and follow that 255 radial in. So let's just unpause and see what happens. You can see the engines are spooling up because I have my throttles firewalled. We're down to 8,900. We are nowhere near the mountain range directly ahead of us yet, so not a big deal. It's just, again, just setting up the flight. It's just the nature of a saved situation. You know, it doesn't know where your controls are set. It has no choice really but to just try to figure it out in flight. So we're climbing on up 1,000 feet per minute. Going to increase this rate of climb a little bit more here. Try to get my speed back down towards 200. You can see 9,300, 9,400. And as we come up on 9,500, you hear the altitude alert just coming off the throttles now. We'll move the vertical speed hold back down towards 0 for straight and level. So I'm going to be a little bit high here, but that's okay. It doesn't really matter. It's at or above 9,500.RTT, which is the waypoint we are just about now flying over. Let's just try to stabilize this a touch. A little bit more down there. That'll do. Notice the needle's moving, so we go localizer hold now. And I am going to come off the throttles now to let the speed drop. And you will see for why. You remember in the video I did and prepared, we need to hold 9,500 until we cross the ridge line that is ahead of us, and then we'll start descending. We're going to descend down to 5,000 feet. So I'll dial in 5,000 here on the altitude alerter. We're not actually using autopilot altitude hold or anything like that. So that's the target altitude. And watch my speed here as it comes down to 200 knots. And we'll start to level out in a second and really grab that radial into Innsbruck. As this comes down to 200 knots, I'm going to switch on down to the autopilot once again, and we're going to put the aircraft into IAS, or indicated airspeed hold. The reason we do that is with the speed set there at 200, our speed currently at 200, the only way the aircraft can maintain 200 knots now is to descend. And there we are, just passing over the ridgeline. How fortuitous is that? So now we're descending, and everything's good. We're in a nice stable descent. We're going to hold 200 knots. Once the aircraft really does settle down, you can see the needle is still increasing that rate of descent a little bit. What I'm going to do is put the flaps out to flaps 5, ready for the approach. Actually, I have my microphone a bit low, so I'm going to move that up. There we go. So we've got flaps 5 in there now. We'll let the aircraft again stabilize. Once you put the flaps out in the 727, it does tend to balloon a little bit, so we're letting the autopilot get used to that and retrim for that. You can see it trimming now. And I think we're good, so I'm going to bring the speed down now to about 180. So just click and hold that, drag it on down there, 180. This will ease our rate of descent in order to bleed some speed, but we should be good. We're 16 miles out. At 6.3 miles out, we're passing over that AEB NDB, and that's where we're going to make our turn. And I think we're probably going to get down to 5,000 feet just before that NDB. So I'll adjust the speed once again because we've got plenty of room to do so. Now ahead of us getting there, we know we're going to turn onto a heading of 230. So I'm going to dial that in and heading hold. So that's 210, that's 220, that's 230 right there. And we're all good. Now we can look around a little bit and admire the scenery. Beautiful clouds in SkyMax version 3, absolutely good. Their claim that it really does not affect the frame rates is absolutely true. I'm quite surprised and shocked to see that, pleasantly so. Alright, so the speed is at 180. Our rate of descent now is 1,500 feet per minute. We are 13 miles out, so we're about 7 miles away from the NDB, where we're going to make our turn, where we really should be around about 5,000 feet. Everything is actually looking really, really nice. We should pop out of this cloud cover any second, by the way. Oh, let me adjust the barometric. This is going to screw the aircraft up. I didn't dial this in. Barometric should be 3027. That's really going to screw things up, because obviously that will put us a little bit higher than we thought we were. But that's fine. it doesn't matter because of how well we planned everything. So 7,200 feet, 11 miles out, so 6 miles, 5 miles to go. We want to be at 5,000 feet in 5 miles, only 2,000 feet to descend now, which is pretty good. Coming down to 7,000 feet, everything's looking lovely. If we don't hit 5,000 at that point, I'll just slow down on the next leg. It's not a big deal. And we're just coming through the bottom of that cloud layer now, which is great. You can just about see Innsbruck there. Pretty good. There you go, the clouds. Now, one of the things I've found actually with FSGRW and SkyMax version 3 is combined, sometimes there'll be delays as the sim will kind of pause to load in weather. It's a little bit, it kills the immersion a little bit, but at the end of the day, I'm prepared to put up with it. The results are pretty good. And it really is good fun actually doing this approach in different sims, which is exactly what I was hoping for. It's very, very different flying this in a 727 in X-Plane to flying it in the NGX in Prepared or FSX. It's because there's a lot less automation, you're feeling a lot more of the difference in the flight models. Anyway, I've got to pay attention. Coming up on 7 miles, because I'm in IAS hold, I can actually control my rate of descent with the throttles. If I increase power, for example, it will level off to try to bleed some of the speed up. But we're not going to need to do that just yet. What I can do now is drop this speed down to 160. You can see we're leveling off now. We're at 5,200 feet, which is ideal. Coming up on 6.5 miles. So at 6.3, which I'm going to guess is about there, we are going to go heading hold. Whoops, there. And that will start our turn around to 210. Sorry, 230, my apologies. Those 210s and 230s, yep, it is 230. And we will continue our descent now, down to 3,700. So I'll switch to mode here just to get my alerter giving me some feedback, like so. And we'll carry on our descent. So still at flaps 5, not worrying about flaps 15 or anything like that, or gear down. We'll do that on the downwind leg, but a nice, stable descent. We're at 4,700 feet. That ping noise telling us we're 1,000 feet above our required altitude. Everything is looking great. So as I said in the intro, our plan is to turn before we collide with that mountain, and we're going to basically follow this line here along the bottom of these slopes. Got to watch the altitude here, and we'll come back on the power to ease the descent as we hit 3,700 feet. So that's 4,000, 3,900, so slowly feeding in power now, watching our rate of descent as we come up on 3,800. A little bit more power. Coming up on 3,700 now, which is the bare minimum. We went under a touch, not a huge deal. Lots of power in there now, a little bit too much, so we're climbing, so that's going to correct the error. It is a bit hit and miss at this point, unfortunately, but that's part of the fun. So although we are flying on autopilot, we're still actually quite hands-on with this. Too low gear, because we're descending. So I'm going to start my turn now around to 264, which is about there, and we will go down to flaps 15, and we will go gear down. And again, just working the throttles now to maintain 3,700 feet. Going to need to put in a bit more power because we've got increased drag now from those flaps and from the gear. Quite a lot more power now. Just backing off the throttles as that VSI needle comes up. And then the next stage of the flight will be to take control just before we hit this mountain and turn to the right and obviously land on runway 08. Not going to go flaps 30 until we are on final, because this aircraft is interesting to fly. It handles very, very differently to the NGX, keeping my speed up as well. My V speed today, I can bring up the V card here and look at landing, is 132. That's my V ref. So my V approach is going to be 137. We're not going to be very precise on that. It's probably going to be around about 140, 145. It doesn't need to be absolutely crazy precise. There's that delay I was telling you about as it loads in the weather there. Only a little glitch. Oh no, now it's doing a big one. There we go. And it'll do that for a little bit, and then it'll stop, and now we're good. So it's got all the weather loaded in now for Innsbruck, because we're very close to that weather reporting station. That's what FSGRW is picking up. Adjusting the throttle, just to get a teeny bit of climb in here. And that's how we control everything, just flying IAS hold all the way down. Pretty neat trick. Now, I'm not sure if I mentioned this, but I am doing things a little differently as well in my flight controls. Today I'm using the Cytec X55, so that kind of gives me some more improved appreciation for how a lot of you people fly when you're using just a joystick instead of an expensive yoke or something like that. And this is really quite severely paused. Oh dear, but it's back now, so we're good. So yeah, I'm a little bit rusty with the X-55 flying an airliner, but I think we'll be alright. So let's see where we're at here. So let's adjust my view a tiny bit. We are climbing, but that's okay. We're going to lose quite a lot of altitude in a second. We're good. Runway is over there, just beneath that ridge. So let's recenter my view. And right about now, disengage the autopilot. Now. Alright, starting our turn, coming off the power. Letting that speed drop down. Watching the rate of descent, just like in the prepared version of this landing. Watching that rate of descent. Trying to get a little over 30 degrees of bank in here, trying to coordinate as well. Do need to coordinate this with the rudder pedals, which is tricky. Bit of back pressure. Just to bring the nose up, that is going to cause me to bleed quite a bit of speed. We're not quite at 30 degrees of bank.
500.
500, that's the radar altimeter. It's going to do that a lot because of the undulating terrain that we're flying over right now. Let's increase the bank. A little bit nervous about doing that. Obviously, for obvious reasons, there's my rate of descent increasing, pulling the nose up. Pulling the nose up, trying not to get a bank angle warning, and there we go, look at that. And we're great. So really coming off the power now. We did pick up a bit of speed, and as that speed comes down now, because we're a little high, we will just slow that descent a touch. Next stage of flaps, all the way down to flaps 30 for landing flaps. Just about getting on the glide path now. You can see one red light. We're looking for 2 reds, 2 whites. There's the 2 reds, 2 whites. So bringing in the power just to slow that rate of descent now to about 500 feet per minute. And we're looking good. We're established. We're stable. We're looking actually really, really good. Last stage of flaps now. It's going to cause us to balloon a little bit. So easing off the power. You see that we went a little high there because of the balloon. So as I come off the power, that will get addressed because our rate of descent will increase. Then bring back the power gently so that we don't plummet through the glide slope and smash into the runway, which is always quite embarrassing. Ask any pilot.
50.
And there we go. Reversers and speed brakes. A little bit of a wobble. See if we can get this mighty FlyJSim 727 to slow down enough to take that exit that we did in the prepared video. I think we're good. So off the reversers now. And there you go. An interesting approach in X-Plane because of the different flight dynamics of the sim. It's a lot more challenging than it is in prepared. A lot. You really do need to really be all over the aircraft and what it's doing. It's also a lot more satisfying when you get it right. It feels like quite an accomplishment, and it already felt like quite an accomplishment because it is a tricky procedure. But managing the procedural aspects along with actually trying to fly as well is good. That's one of the reasons I like X-Plane. Each to their own. I know many of you don't like X-Plane. Again, not going to get into that whole FSX versus X-Plane debate. Each to their own. Anyway, just like in the prepared video, I'm going to show you a replay because this is X-Plane. I can show you a good replay. As always, my name is Froogle. Thank you so very, very much for watching, and until next time, I'll see you very soon.